Thank you very much, Mr. Amir Lati, for speaking to us at such a late hour in Hong Kong. You are the Consul General of Israel in Hong Kong. You have been in your role for a few months, but unfortunately, we are right now in the worst outbreak of the COVID virus in Hong Kong in the last few years, and things are only getting worse. But I think Israel's experience in this matter will probably be a very valuable lesson to us in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much. I'm here in Hong Kong a little bit more than 5 months, and indeed I have to tell you that the recent weeks are challenging for us, for the entire community. I have to say, based at least on the Israeli experience, the Omicron wave will pass. Different places and different countries adopted different ways to cope with the corona, because we have to bear in mind that there are also some differences between different places, like that affects the impact of the corona, like the size of the population, the density of the population, the age of the population, and so on and so forth. And there is not golden solution. Israel's strategy now, you could describe it by taking decisions based on accumulative medical and scientific facts. When basically the idea is to combat the virus while keeping the economy and the life as open as possible.
Right.
In other words, it's we're living with the virus, but on the same side, at the same time, pushing the vaccination within the all spheres and segments of the populations that can receive the vaccination. Because I don't think there is an argument. Well, there are, of course, people that are anti-vaccines. I think all the scientific data points to the fact that people that got vaccinated, that the impact is much less severe and the mortality rate is lower than people that were not vaccinated. Israel has started the vaccination campaign quite early. Israel started vaccinating the children also relatively early. Israel started giving the booster relatively early, and also the fourth vaccine. The numbers have peaked in Israel in the last couple of weeks, but now we are on the way out of what we call the fifth wave in Israel. And I have to tell you that most restrictions in Israel were already removed.
Indeed, Israel is one of the first countries to completely dismantle all COVID-related restrictions and completely open to the world. Even though we are right now in the darkest of times in Hong Kong, we still need to look forward to that day. And the business community here, especially the international business community, is very anxious to see that day too. There's a lot of debate about Hong Kong's status as an international financial hub, a business hub, how much the current restrictions have hurt that status. But in terms of reopening up to the world, what do you think Israel's experience can help Hong Kong in terms of what are the key points you need to be very careful about? What are the necessary steps to take?
First of all, I think one of the things needed, again, in order to cope with the virus is flexibility, because the virus itself changes, and there are also different ways how to cope with this, and we need to adapt quickly. Corona has, of course, its first and most instant medical impact, but it also has impact in economy. And people are losing their jobs, and there are the entire sectors of the economy that are left jobless for 2 years. Tourism, for example. It also have mental effect. People are held in their houses for weeks. Children are not going to schools. It also has this impact, which we might not see in the short time, but we will see, and we might see in the longer run. We might see, again, more mental fatigue. We might see, also phenomena of obesity. People are at home, they're not physically exercising, they're eating more. So we have to look at it as something that is more, I think, holistic than just looking at the focusing only on the COVID-19 impact. Hong Kong is a global financial hub, which its openness is very important to the business in this very, very special place. In the Israeli case, policy was changed along the way.
Right.
So I do think that the main thing was really to take all the measure into consideration, then adopt a policy considering this, first of all, the medical facts, considering the economic impacts, considering the overall medical impacts, and to bear in mind that you should be flexible because the virus is.
Yes. Let's also talk about your work portfolio here in Hong Kong.
Sure.
Obviously, a big part of your job is to promote and foster economic and technological cooperation between Hong Kong and Israel, and by extension, the Greater Bay Area, even big part of China. You spent big part of your career in China and Asia. You speak very good Chinese. You were posted in Chengdu and Shanghai before for many years. So from what you have observed in mainland China and in the last few months here in Hong Kong, what do you think are the comparative advantages in terms of establishing and building on technological cooperation between these places and Israel?
Israel is a leading tech hub, and its innovation excels in many fields and in many sectors, whether it's healthcare, agriculture, environmental, IT, telecom, fintech, and many more. The origins of the Israeli innovation is based on cultural aspects, government support, geopolitical factors, and more. But I do think that in this field we have a lot to share and cooperate with China and with Hong Kong. Hong Kong is, as I mentioned, and as it's well known, one of the most important global financial and service centers in the world. I do think that bringing to Hong Kong some of Israel's IT, fintech, smart city, and also healthcare technologies has a room for a much bigger potential or cooperation than what we have now.
So when you look at Hong Kong, are you primarily looking at Hong Kong for sources of investment and funding? Obviously, it's a rich financial hub with a lot of money that is very ready to go into technology investment. But on the other hand, last few years, the Hong Kong government has also been very actively promoting itself as a center of innovation.
First of all, I'll divide my answer into a few parts. One of them is, yes, investments. We are looking to connect Israeli technologies with Hong Kong investors. Last year was a peak year for capital raised by the tech industry in Israel. The Israeli tech companies rose $26 billion US. Mind you, again, it's on the backdrop of the corona. So there was more money, 135% more than what it was in 2020 that was poured into the Israeli tech companies. Most of it went to IT and to healthcare. And not surprisingly, because people are working from home, there was more need for data security, to enable people to work from home from the first place, cloud computing, and healthcare from obvious reasons. Some of this money came, of course, from overseas investors. So we do think, and we are looking for investors from Hong Kong that are looking for opportunities in Israel, both financial and strategic.
Yeah.
Strategic to a lot of Israeli companies is even more important because it's not only the sum of investment, it's what business can it follow or even more important, new markets.
Right.
And then Hong Kong is a bridge. Hong Kong is a bridge to China, and Hong Kong could be also a bridge to other countries in this continent. So yes, the financial aspect or the investment aspect is an important part of what we're doing here. The other one is to matchmake companies that are willing or want to sell technologies or products in Hong Kong or through Hong Kong to China.
Right.
The other thing is more on the research level. We have recently, together with the Information and Technology Commission of Hong Kong, published a call of proposal for Israeli tech companies and Hong Kong tech companies that wish to execute together an industrial R&D joint project and enjoy government funds to do so.
Right. The government support, is it coming right now from Israel or also including Hong Kong and the mainland?
The government, this agreement is signed between Israel and Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
So the due date to submit the proposal is in May. And then there will be a joint committee to evaluate the project. Then they will decide which project will be subsidized by the government from both sides. We established Israeli direct contact between universities here in Hong Kong and universities in Israel, where whether it's from student exchange, lecture exchange, joint seminars, and also R&D projects. Now we are helping an Israeli university, Haifa University, to establish a joint research center with Hong Kong UST, University of Science and Technology, in the field of ocean studies. We will have a president of, probably the City University of Hong Kong president will go to Israel next month. We are very happy with this visit, and we will help them also to meet the top universities in Israel, because it's not only, in my view, the academic operation. It's also where the next generation of Hong Kong can meet the next generation of Israel.
Have you also seen interest in this direction of Israeli companies coming to list in Hong Kong, tapping into the capital market here?
Up to now, there was one Israeli company, I think, that was purchased by Fosun in Shanghai that was listed here.
Right.
Alma Lasers. As soon as things will ease down a bit, I was supposed to meet the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, especially or specifically about this issue, because we think it could be a good opportunity for companies here from Israel to enter the China, but not only the China, the Asian financial markets through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange.
In the ideal world, I can see there's tons of interest from China and from Hong Kong in some of Israel's most advanced technologies, for example, in military, civilian, dual-use technologies, in AI, in bioscience. But obviously, geopolitics has made a lot of these areas kind of taboo. A lot of China's top companies in these areas have become targets of U.S. sanctions, and therefore they couldn't work with Israeli companies much either. So from this point on, do you think the additional cooperation projects will mostly come from the so-called non-sensitive areas, or is there also room to develop some areas that is already under a lot of international scrutiny?
Israel and China marked the 30-year anniversary for diplomatic relations less than 1.5 months ago.
Right.
On the very day that we marked the 30th anniversary, 24th of January, we have conducted the 5th Innovation Commission between Israel and China, which is practically the highest G2G mechanism between Israel and China. This Innovation Commission comprises of 15 government ministries and agencies, which represent the Ministry of Science, Agriculture, Legal Affairs, Education, environmental technologies, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Economy, Higher Education Council, and so on. So we do think that in these areas, which I just counted, the potential is still huge. And these are indeed the sectors that we would wish to focus on. Israeli companies are usually medium or small size companies. Even the technological companies, they could have very good technology, but sometimes they don't have the financial stamina to wait a lot of years until they will get success in the Chinese market. If
Right.
they will find a partner that will tell them, I can show you the way, I will give you the contacts, I will make sure of your business development, then they will come. I can tell you, without revealing the names, that we're now dealing with the case of a possible investment. And the thing that interested the Israeli company most is the strategic aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm a good company. I know that I have a very good technology. The $5, $10, $20 million that you're going to invest with me is very good. It is very, very nice. But what I want to do is to help me open the market, help me get to more clients in Asia, help me get to more, important players. This is where I want you, because this $20 million I can find also in other places.
Exactly.
But your added value is the business development that we're going to do together.
And also the latest medical crisis in Hong Kong seems to be spurring a new wave of innovation in bioscience, in medical science, in developing, very quickly developing vaccinations and drugs for some of the new viruses that are going to hit the human race. Do you see enough interest from both governments in Hong Kong and Israel to, aggressively achieve greater cooperation here?
When I look again about the tech industry in Israel last year, from the $26 billion that I mentioned before, more than 60% went to IT.
Right.
IT is cybersecurity, fintech, cloud computing, and so on. The rest, more than 20%, went to healthcare. You have pharmaceutical, you have medical equipment, and so on. But we have to remember that healthcare, the time to market is slower than in other sectors.
Yes.
Then again, the market could be much wider than in other sectors. But I think the corona manifested the importance of supply chain, but the importance of the healthcare industry and the importance of healthcare industry altogether. And one area that I would especially want to point out is telemedicine,
Mm-hmm.
which in the Israeli experience of coping with corona was very important. And I think the importance of telemedicine, we will see it increasing in the future. Healthcare, without any doubts, is something that we would like to cooperate with Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And when I say healthcare, I'm not only talking about, again, medical equipment. I'm not only talking about research. I'm also talking about training.
Yes.
And about sharing medical knowledge. And we are perfectly reached our hand, in sharing every medical experience that we have with Israel to the Hong Kong government, and we will be happily to do so.